The alien ships descended onto Earth like a storm rolling in from the stars, their sleek forms gleaming under the pale light of the moon. They hovered above a secluded area on the planet, the chosen spot for the meeting. The aliens had watched humanity. For centuries, they believed they understood the human race. They thought of humans as fragile, weak creatures living in chaos, far from their true potential. They studied the mistakes, the wars, the suffering, and the seemingly endless conflict across the globe. To them, humans were nothing more than ants moving around, without purpose, so the decision was made to step in, take control, and guide the humans towards their greater destiny. The aliens knew it would be easy to bring these primitives under their control. They had weapons, advanced technology far beyond anything humans could comprehend. They were certain of their success. They didn't expect resistance or even hesitation from a race that could barely get along with itself. They made their way to Earth confident that their plan would work, but the humans had no idea they were coming at first. No one knew the ships were there. The aliens had arrived in silence. They made no noise, no warning. Their arrival was a surprise. They were ready to reveal themselves to the world and take the first steps in what they believed would be humanity's transformation. They had chosen a peaceful place to land, a small valley surrounded by towering mountains. They thought it would make a good first impression. The aliens sent out a representative, someone who had studied humanity from afar, someone who believed they could speak to the humans in a way they would understand. The alien ambassador stepped forward. He broadcasted a message across the valley, hoping to make contact. The words were simple, direct, and confident. "We come in peace. We are the Gloktari. We have been watching your planet for some time, and we believe it is time to make our presence known. We have come to guide you to a greater future. Your kind has the potential for greatness, but you must first accept our leadership." The message echoed through the valley, and for a moment there was silence. No one moved. No one responded. The ambassador waited patiently. He had been trained for this moment, but what he didn't expect was the reaction of the humans who had gathered around them. The first sign of resistance came from a young woman standing at the edge of the crowd. She raised her hand, her voice calm, yet filled with defiance. "Who do you think you are to come here and tell us what to do?" she said. The words struck like a sharp blow to the ambassador's pride. He was stunned. He had prepared for many responses, but not for this, a voice of resistance so quickly, so boldly. The woman continued, her words ringing out across the valley. "We don't need you to guide us or to save us. We're not your children. We are humans, and we make our own choices." The crowd murmured in agreement, some nodding their heads, others looking at each other with a new understanding. For the first time in years, there was unity, not under the aliens, but against them. The ambassador's calm demeanor began to crack. He repeated his message, this time with more urgency. "You do not understand the power we possess. We are here to help you, to show you the way forward." But the humans were not listening. They had already made up their minds. The young woman spoke again, her words clear and steady. "We don't want your help. We don't need it. We're not weak, and we're not helpless." The ambassador's eyes narrowed. His mind raced. He had not anticipated this level of defiance. He had believed the humans were too fractured, too divided to resist. Now they were united against him and his people in the blink of an eye. The ambassador's plan began to unravel, but he refused to back down. He raised his voice to rally his people. "We will not be denied. We will show you our strength." The aliens prepared to demonstrate their power with a show of force. They believed it would bring the humans to their knees. What they didn't realize was that their strength was not enough to subdue the spirit of humanity. The crowd didn't back down. They stood their ground, united by the defiance of one human woman. The ambassador ordered his forces to move forward, but the humans did not flinch. They stood firm. The aliens had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity. They thought they were weak, but they were wrong. They had no idea what they were up against. The humans would not bow to anyone, not even to beings from another world. They were ready to fight for their freedom, their survival, and their future. And as the aliens prepared to move in, the first real battle began. The aliens would soon learn that humanity was not what they thought it was. The war for Earth had only just begun. The aliens did not expect this. Humanity's reaction caught them off guard. They had studied Earth for so long, and yet failed to understand its true strength. The ambassador stood frozen in disbelief. He had come to guide them to a better future, to offer them knowledge and power that would elevate them, but instead he was met with defiance and pride. Humanity was not as weak as they had thought. The humans weren't afraid of the aliens, nor were they willing to simply obey. They were willing to stand and fight if necessary. The alien forces began to mobilize. They had technology so advanced that they believed no one could stand in their way. But as they moved forward, they were met with a surprising sight. The humans had begun to organize. They were not soldiers, not trained warriors, but their resolve was powerful. Their unity was undeniable. They had gathered in large numbers, armed with anything they could find: tools, weapons, even things they had no idea how to use, but they were willing to fight. They had the strength of heart the aliens had no concept of. This kind of resistance, they had expected submission, not defiance. Their forces moved forward, confident in their ability to crush any opposition. But the humans didn't back down. They gathered together in large groups, some armed with rifles, others with nothing but their willpower. Their leader was the young woman who had stood up to the aliens. The ambassador could see her now, standing at the front of the crowd, her eyes burning with determination. She had become the symbol of the human fight for freedom. And as the alien forces advanced toward them, the humans were ready. They did not stand in fear. They stood ready to defend their homes, their families, their world. The aliens underestimated how powerful a people could be when they were united in purpose. They had no idea how strong humanity's will could be. They thought their technology would easily crush them, but it was not enough against the strength of human unity. The battle began with the aliens firing their advanced weaponry upon the humans. The sky lit up with blasts of light as the energy weapons shot toward the ground. But the humans did not scatter. They did not flee. Instead, they fought back with everything they had. They were outmatched in technology, but not in heart. The first wave of aliens charged forward, their weapons blazing, but the humans fought back with whatever they could find. They hurled rocks at the invaders. They used makeshift weapons to try and hold them off. They were not trained soldiers, but they were fighting for something far greater: their survival, their freedom. The aliens had no idea what they were dealing with. The humans were not just fighting to stay alive. They were fighting for their dignity, for their future, and for the chance to make their own choices. The battle raged on as the humans stood firm against the alien onslaught. The aliens had expected the humans to flee, but they did not. They fought. They resisted. They refused to give in, no matter the cost. The ambassador could not understand why they were not surrendering. It was as if they were not afraid of death, as if they were willing to die for the freedom to choose their own path. The alien forces began to take heavy losses, but they still pressed forward. They believed that eventually the humans would tire and give in. But the humans did not tire. They fought with everything they had. They dug in their heels and stood firm. The alien forces tried to use their superior technology to crush the humans. But it wasn't enough. The humans' resilience was something the aliens had never anticipated. It was the one thing that no amount of technology could defeat the humans. Strength was not in their weapons. It was in their spirit. It was in their refusal to give up. No matter what the aliens tried, they could not break the humans' resolve. They had miscalculated. They thought that their technology would make them invincible, but they were wrong. They had underestimated the power of human determination. The ambassador watched in disbelief as the battle unfolded before him. He had come here thinking that the humans would kneel before the might of the Galactic, but instead they stood their ground and fought back. He watched as his forces began to retreat under the pressure of the human resistance. They had never seen anything like this before. They had never encountered a species willing to fight so fiercely for its survival. It was a mistake that would cost them dearly. The ambassador stood silent as his forces pulled back. They were not retreating out of fear, but out of realization that the humans could not be conquered. They could not be subdued. They were too strong, too proud, and too willing to fight for their future. The humans had won their first battle, and in doing so they had shown the aliens that they were not what they had expected. They were not weak. They were not fragile. They were strong, they were united, and they were not going to be pushed around by anyone, not even by beings from another world. The humans had sent a message, one that the aliens would not soon forget. They had made it clear that Earth was not a place to be conquered. It was a place to be respected, and if the aliens wanted to take Earth, they would have to face the full force of humanity's will. Aftermath of the first battle left the aliens stunned. They had never faced such resistance. They had come to Earth believing it would be an easy conquest. They had studied the planet for years, watched its people struggle with division and conflict, and assumed that this weakness would make them ripe for control. But the humans had proven them wrong. They had fought back. Not with advanced technology, but with something far more dangerous to the invaders: their spirit, their unity, their refusal to bow to anyone. The aliens retreated into their ships to reassess their strategy. They had suffered losses they had not expected. The human forces, though disorganized and under-equipped, had managed to push them back, and that was something the Galactic had never seen before. They had always believed themselves to be the superior race with weapons and technology that no other species could match, but here on Earth they had found a force. They could not understand a force that was beyond anything they had studied. The ambassador sat in his command center pondering what had just occurred. His mind raced as he reviewed the battle. His forces had not been defeated by better weapons or greater numbers. They had been defeated by something far more unexpected, something that no amount of technology could counter. The will of humanity. He could not fathom it. How could these creatures, these so-called primitives, put up such a fierce fight against his superior forces? The ambassador had underestimated the human race. He had thought of them as weak, fragile, and easily manipulated, but now he realized the truth. They were far more dangerous than he had imagined. They were not a race to be controlled. They were a race that would fight to the death to maintain their freedom. He turned to his generals and issued a new order. "We must change our approach," he said, his voice filled with frustration. "We cannot defeat them with our current strategy. We must find a way to break their spirit." His generals nodded in agreement, but even they seemed uncertain of how to proceed. They had never encountered a species so unwilling to submit to their will, and it was becoming increasingly clear that brute force alone would not be enough to conquer Earth. But the ambassador was not ready to give up. Not yet. They had made a mistake by underestimating the humans, and now they would have to correct it. They would need to use a different approach, one that would break the humans' resolve once and for all. The ambassador's mind began to work on a new plan. He knew that they could not defeat the humans by sheer force alone. They needed to find a way to divide them, to weaken their unity. They needed to sow discord and mistrust among the humans. If they could do that, then perhaps they could force them to turn on each other, and in doing so, they would create the conditions for an easy victory. The ambassador turned to his communications officer and ordered a message to be broadcast across Earth. "We have seen your strength," the message began, "but your strength will be your undoing. We are not your enemies. We come to offer you a path to greatness, to help you realize your full potential. But you must accept our leadership. If you refuse to submit to us, you will only destroy yourselves. Your resistance will lead to nothing but destruction." The message was broadcast worldwide to every corner of the Earth. It was a direct challenge to humanity's pride and a warning of the consequences of continuing to fight back. But what the aliens did not realize was that their message did not have the intended effect. Instead of breaking the human spirit, it only strengthened it. The humans did not fear the aliens. They did not bow to threats. They had faced worse challenges in their history and had always risen above them. The alien message only served to fuel their determination to fight for their freedom. It was clear now that the more the aliens tried to control humanity, the more they would push the humans into resistance. The human leaders gathered once again to discuss their next move. They knew that the alien forces would not give up easily. The aliens had already shown that they were willing to destroy everything to get what they wanted, but the humans were not afraid. They knew what they were up against, but they also knew that they could not back down. If they did, then everything they had fought for would be lost. They began to formulate a new plan, one that would take the fight to the aliens and show them that Earth was not theirs to take. The humans would use the very tactics that had worked against them, unity and defiance. They would come together as one. They would fight not just for their survival, but for the future of their world. They would show the aliens that no matter how powerful their weapons were, no matter how advanced their technology was, it could not defeat the strength of the human spirit. And so the resistance began to grow. The humans began to organize more effectively. They built makeshift weapons and used their ingenuity to create new ways to strike back at the aliens. They were still outgunned and outnumbered, but they had something the aliens could not understand. They had hope, and that hope would be their greatest weapon. The ambassador watched as the humans began to regroup. He could see this spark of resistance spreading across the planet, and it unnerved him. He had thought that the humans would fall in line after a few displays of power, but instead they had become even more resolute. He had underestimated them again. And now he was beginning to realize that this war would not be won through technology or weapons. It would be won through the willpower of the people, and that was something that no alien force had ever been able to overcome. As the humans prepared for their next battle, they did so with a newfound sense of purpose. They were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their future, fighting to prove that they were worthy of a place in the universe, and that nothing, not even the most powerful alien race in the galaxy, could take that away from them. Battle had only begun, but the humans were already showing their strength. The alien forces underestimated humanity. Once more they believed their weapons, their technology, their advanced strategies would crush any resistance. But the humans had a different weapon, one that the aliens could not comprehend: their willpower, their unity, their ability to fight for something more than just survival. The ambassador watched from his command center as the humans continued to organize and resist. Their defiance grew. With every passing hour, they were not just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for something bigger than themselves: their future, their freedom, their dignity, and the aliens didn't know how to stop it. The ambassador turned to his generals in frustration. He had hoped that the show of power the alien ships had demonstrated would be enough to break the humans, but it wasn't. They had refused to submit. Instead, they had come together in a way the aliens never expected. Their resistance was not just a fight for survival, it was a fight for everything they held dear, and that made them more dangerous than any weapon the aliens possessed. He stood silent for a moment as his thoughts raced. He had to find a way to break the humans. Their unity was the one thing that kept them going, and if the aliens could disrupt that, if they could find a way to divide them, they might finally win. But how? The ambassador thought back to his people's past, their own struggles, and how they had once faced the same challenges. They now presented to the humans. They had learned the hard way that unity was the key to survival, and it seemed that the humans had learned that same lesson. But the ambassador knew that his people had managed to overcome division, and now they had the upper hand in technology. It seemed impossible that the humans could ever fight back effectively, but there was something in their eyes, something in their actions that told the ambassador they were more than capable of winning this fight. Their defiance showed that humanity had something that no alien species had been able to suppress. Hope. Hope was the force that drove them, and it was something that no weapon, no technology could ever destroy. The ambassador realized he had miscalculated again. He had thought that the aliens could simply take control of Earth by force, but he had underestimated humanity's ability to survive. Their resilience and their unbreakable will. The humans were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting to prove something to themselves, to each other, and to the universe, that they were worth saving, that they were worthy of their place in the cosmos, that they could stand against any force that threatened their world. With this realization, the ambassador knew his next step had to be different. He couldn't just rely on brute force any longer. He needed to find another way to break the humans' resolve, and that's when he turned to the one thing he hadn't yet tried: fear. Fear could divide the humans. Fear could cause them to question their own strength. Fear could make them turn on each other. But fear had to be used carefully. The ambassador knew that pushing the humans too far could cause them to fight even harder, but if he played it right, if he found a way to make them believe they had no choice but to give in, then perhaps he could finally win this war. He issued a new directive to his forces. Begin the fear campaign. He set his voice cold and calculated the alien forces. Moved quickly implementing the ambassador's orders, they began to launch small strikes against civilian targets, places that would cause maximum fear but minimal loss of life. The aliens didn't want to destroy humanity, they wanted to break them. They wanted the humans to see that their resistance was futile, that their unity would lead to nothing but more pain and destruction. The strikes were sudden and swift. The aliens targeted cities, towns, villages all over the planet. They did not destroy entire populations, but they made sure to send a clear message to the humans. Resist and you will suffer. The first strike hit a small village in the middle of a vast desert. The aliens destroyed the power grid, cutting off communication and leaving the village in darkness for hours. They did not kill anyone, but they made sure the village's population saw the destruction and felt the fear. The next strike hit a city on the coast. The aliens bombed several key infrastructures, sending waves of terror through the population. The humans had never seen such ruthless efficiency before. They didn't understand why the aliens were doing this, why they were attacking them without fully conquering them. But that was exactly what the ambassador wanted. He wanted the humans to feel the fear creeping into their hearts. He wanted them to begin doubting their own strength, to question whether fighting back was worth it. The ambassador knew that fear could break the strongest of wills, and that if the humans began to fear them, they would begin to doubt themselves. But the ambassador didn't know the humans as well as he thought. The fear did not cause them to break. It did not make them lose hope. Instead, it only strengthened their resolve. The fear only fueled their anger. The aliens thought they could use fear to divide them, but instead it united them even more. The humans looked at the destruction and saw not defeat but a call to action. They saw the destruction as a reason to fight harder, not to give up. They saw that their survival was not just about resisting the aliens, but about proving that they could not be broken. No matter what the aliens did, no matter how many attacks they launched, the humans would fight back. The ambassador watched from his command center as the humans continued to resist. He was baffled. They should have been trembling with fear, but instead, they were standing even taller than before. He couldn't understand why they weren't crumbling under the pressure, why they weren't turning on each other. But then he realized it was because the humans had something more powerful than fear. They had something that no alien force could ever defeat. They had something stronger than any weapon, stronger than any technology. They had their spirit. They had each other, and they had hope. And no matter how many times the ambassador tried to break them, it was something he could never take away from them. The war was far from over, but the humans had proven that they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for everything they stood for, and nothing, not even the alien forces, could stop. That the battle for Earth had reached a crucial point. The aliens had underestimated humanity. At every turn, their technology, their weapons, had proven ineffective against the spirit of the human race. The ambassador watched from his command center as the human forces continued to resist. He had tried to break their will. He had tried to use fear to divide them, but nothing seemed to work. Every time they were knocked down, they rose back up stronger than before. It was something that no alien force had ever encountered before. A species that refused to be broken, a species that would fight for their survival, no matter the cost. And now the ambassador was faced with a choice. He could continue with his assault and risk losing everything, or he could change tactics and try something else. The alien forces had taken significant losses in the past few weeks, but they still held the upper hand in terms of firepower. They had the ability to destroy entire cities with a single strike. But the humans were not backing down. They were not running in fear. They were standing tall, united in their fight for freedom, and that was something the aliens had not anticipated. The ambassador knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't allow this war to drag on any longer. The longer the humans fought, the stronger they became, and the harder it would be to defeat them. If he wanted to win, he had to break them. Now before they could build up more strength, he turned to his generals and gave the order. We will change our approach, we will target their leaders, we will make them believe that their fight is hopeless and that they are alone in this struggle. The new plan was simple but effective. The aliens would target the leaders of the human resistance. They would strike at their homes and their families. They would make the humans believe that even their strongest leaders could not protect them. They would take away the one thing that kept humanity united, the hope that they could overcome the aliens. The ambassador knew that if he could destroy the human leadership, then the rest of the humans would scatter and the resistance would fall apart. The humans had already shown their defiance and their unity, but they had not yet shown what would happen if their leaders were taken from them. The first strike was swift and devastating. The aliens attacked the human leaders' headquarters, a small fortified city that had become the symbol of humanity's resistance. The alien ships descended from the sky without warning. They bombed the city to the ground. They targeted the communications towers and destroyed all means of contact with the outside world. The humans inside the city fought bravely, but they were outmatched. They tried to defend their headquarters, but the alien forces were too strong. The city fell in hours. The human leader who had once stood at the forefront of the resistance was killed in the attack. His death sent a shockwave through the human forces. The ambassador watched as the humans reacted with a mixture of grief and rage. He had expected them to collapse in despair, but they did not. Instead, they rallied together. Their loss fueled their anger. They took to the streets with more resolve than ever before. They were not going to give up. They were not going to let their leader's death be in vain. They were going to keep fighting. The ambassador was stunned by this reaction. The humans were supposed to crumble without their leader. They were supposed to fall apart, but instead they became more determined. Their unity was not just in their leader, it was in their cause they were fighting for. Something greater than one person. They were fighting for their world, their future, their freedom, and no matter how many leaders the aliens killed, they could not stop the humans' fight. The ambassador realized he had made a critical mistake. He had thought that killing their leaders would break the humans, but instead it had only made them more dangerous. The humans were not fighting for one person. They were fighting for everyone. They were fighting for the idea that no one could control them, no one could dictate their future, and the ambassador knew that this was something the aliens could never defeat. The aliens had underestimated the power of hope and unity. Once again they had miscalculated. They had thought that the death of one human leader would shatter the resistance, but the truth was that the humans had grown beyond that. They had learned to fight for each other, not just for one individual. The alien forces moved quickly to try and capitalize on their success. They attacked other human strongholds, targeting the leaders of the remaining resistance groups, but the results were always the same. The humans did not break. They did not scatter. They kept fighting. They kept pushing back no matter what the aliens threw at them. The ambassador's frustration grew as the humans continued to resist. Their unity was unshakable. Their defiance only grew stronger with every loss. The humans were not afraid to fight back. They were not afraid to die for what they believed in, and that was the one thing the aliens could never understand. It was the strength of humanity's will. The ambassador knew that this war could not be won with just technology or weapons. It could only be won by breaking the spirit of the humans. And that was something the aliens had failed to do. No matter how many battles they won, no matter how many strikes they launched, the humans were not going to give up. They were not going to stop fighting, and the ambassador realized that the only way this war would end was with a full recognition of humanity's strength. They were not just another species. They were not weak. They were strong. They were capable of standing up to anything the universe threw at them, and the ambassador knew that he had made a fatal mistake underestimating them. The humans were not going to fall. They were going to rise. They had already proven that no matter how many times they were knocked down, they would always get back up. They were not going to stop fighting until they had won their freedom, until they had proven to the universe that they were not just survivors, they were warriors. The aliens had misjudged humanity from the beginning, and now they were learning just how wrong they were. The humans were ready to take back their world, and no matter what the aliens did, they would not stop them. The final battle was yet to come, but it was clear that the humans were not going to lose. They were not going to be defeated. They had already won something more important than any battle. They had won their pride. They had won their place in the universe, and no alien force could ever take that away from them. Alien forces had been relentless in their assault, but as the days passed, the humans grew stronger with every battle. They fought back with a fierceness that no one expected. Their resistance was like a fire that refused to be put out. No matter how many times the aliens struck, they could not extinguish the will of the human spirit. The ambassador stood in his command center, watching the battlefield unfold on the screens before him. He had hoped that the humans would eventually give in, that they would crumble under the pressure of his forces, but they had not. They had only grown more determined. Each attack only made them fight harder. They had turned their grief into strength and their anger into action. The humans had proven that they were not like any species the aliens had encountered before. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their future and the future of their world. The ambassador knew that the time had come to make a final decision. The war had dragged on for far too long, and the aliens were beginning to take heavy losses. The humans had proven that they would not break, that their unity could not be destroyed, and the more the aliens pushed, the stronger the humans became. The ambassador could no longer deny it. Humanity had earned his respect, and yet he knew that he could not let them win. If the humans were allowed to keep fighting, they would eventually push the aliens off their planet. They would reclaim their world and send the invaders back to the stars, and the ambassador could not allow that to happen. But could he do? He had tried everything. He had used fear. He had targeted the humans. Leaders, he had bombed their cities, and yet they had not broken. They had not surrendered. They had fought back with everything they had. And now the ambassador was left with only one option. He had to offer the humans a choice. He had to make them believe that surrendering was their only option. He called his top generals into the command center and gave them orders. Prepare the final offer, he said, his voice cold and steady. We will offer them peace, but only on our terms. They will have to submit to us and accept our leadership, or they will be destroyed. We will make them believe they have no choice. The alien forces began preparing for the final act of this war. They began broadcasting a new message across the globe. The ambassador's voice echoed through the airwaves. Humans, we have seen your strength. We have witnessed your defiance, but now you face the consequences of your actions. We are offering you a choice. Surrender now and submit to our leadership, and we will spare your people and your world. Continue to resist, and we will wipe you from existence. The choice is yours. The message was cold and calculated, designed to break the humans' resolve, to make them believe that they had no other option but to give in. But the ambassador did not realize that the humans were not the kind of people who could be broken by threats. They had already faced the worst of what the aliens could offer, and they had stood their ground. They had proven time and time again that no matter what the aliens did, they would never give up, and the ambassador's message only made them more determined to fight back. When the broadcast ended, the human leaders gathered once again in their underground base. They knew what the aliens were offering. They knew that the ambassador was trying to trick them into surrendering. But they also knew that they could not give in, not after everything they had fought for. Their unity was stronger than ever. They had already lost so much, but they had gained something more important. They had gained each other, and that was something the aliens could never take away. The human leader stood before her people, her voice steady and unwavering. We will not surrender. We will not bow to anyone. We will fight until the last one of us stands. And when this is over, we will stand together as one people. We will show the universe that no force can take away our freedom, no matter how powerful they are. The humans were not afraid of the aliens' offer. They were not afraid of the threats or the destruction the aliens had caused. They were afraid of losing what they had fought for, losing the chance to live on their own terms, to make their own choices. They had already proven that they were willing to sacrifice everything for that right, and now they were going to take the fight to the aliens once and for all. The final battle would be a turning point for humanity. They would no longer hide in fear. They would stand and fight for their future. The ambassador had made a mistake he had underestimated. The strength of humanity, he had thought that by offering peace, he could break them. But instead he had only made them more determined to defeat him and his forces. The humans had found their strength, not in their weapons but in each other, and they were not going to let anyone take that away from them. They were going to fight for their world, their freedom, and their future. And no alien force could ever stop them. The final decision had been made. Humanity would fight until the last breath. They would not surrender. They would not give up. They would not let the aliens take what was rightfully theirs, and the ambassador knew that he had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated the humans in every way, and now it was too late to stop. Then the tide had turned, and the war for Earth was far from over. But one thing was certain: humanity had already won the most important battle. They had shown that their spirit could not be broken. No matter what the aliens did, they could never defeat the will of the human race. The final battle was about to unfold across the skies of Earth. The air was thick with tension as the human resistance gathered for the fight of their lives. The alien forces had underestimated humanity from the very beginning. They had thought that with their superior technology and weaponry, they would crush any opposition, but they had not counted on the human spirit, the human will to survive, to fight for their future, no matter the odds, no matter the cost. Humanity had proven that they could withstand anything thrown their way, and now the aliens would learn that the true strength of humanity lay in its unity and determination. The ambassador stood in his command center watching the preparations unfold on his screens. He had given humanity a choice, and they had refused to back down. They had chosen to fight for their world, for their freedom, for their right to exist on their own terms. He had tried everything to break them. He had attacked their cities, targeted their leaders, used fear as a weapon, but it had only made them stronger. Now he faced an army of humans who had nothing to lose and everything to fight for. The alien ships hovered above the Earth, their weapons primed, their forces ready to strike, but the ambassador's confidence was beginning to waver. He had never faced an enemy like this before. The humans were relentless. Their resistance had not only survived, but had thrived. They had not given in to fear. They had not broken under pressure. They had stood firm in the face of certain destruction, and in doing so, they had earned the respect of their enemies and the fear of their conquerors. The ambassador knew that the humans had reached a point of no return. They would never surrender. They would never accept alien rule. And if he wanted to win this war, he would have to break them completely. But deep down he knew that it was too late. The humans had already won their victory. They had proven that no matter what happened, they would never be enslaved, they would never be controlled, and they would never be silenced. The battle began with a roar of gunfire and the hum of alien weapons. The skies lit up with explosions as the two forces collided. Humanity's resistance fighting back with every weapon they had, while the alien forces unleashed everything they had to crush the humans once and for all. The battle raged on for hours. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with a strength that seemed almost unnatural. They used their ingenuity, their knowledge of the terrain, their weapons and their technology to fight back. The aliens had never seen anything like it before. The human forces had adapted to every alien tactic and turned it against them. They knew their own world better than the invaders ever could, and that made them unpredictable. The ambassador watched as his forces struggled against the relentless tide of human resistance. He had hoped that the superior firepower of the Galactic would overwhelm the humans, but it wasn't working. Every strike from the aliens only seemed to fuel the humans' resolve. They were determined to win. They were determined to fight for their world and for their right to live free of alien rule. The human leader stood at the front of the battle, her eyes filled with fire as she gave orders to her troops. She had led them through every battle, every loss, every hardship, and now she stood as the symbol of human resistance. She had fought for her people, for her world, and now she would lead them into the final fight for their survival. She looked out over the battlefield as her forces fought with everything they had, and for a moment she felt a sense of peace. The aliens could destroy their cities. They could destroy their homes, but they could never destroy their spirit. They could never take away the human will to fight and to survive. The ambassador knew that the end was near. His forces were being overwhelmed by the sheer determination of the humans, but he could not admit defeat. He could not allow them to win. No matter what it took, he would fight to the very end. But as the battle raged on, he saw something in the human forces that he had not seen before, something that made him pause for the first time in this entire war. The humans were not fighting out of fear or desperation. They were fighting out of love, out of a deep and unshakable love for their world, for their future, for each other. The ambassador realized that he could never defeat that kind of love. He could never destroy the bond that held humanity together. The human leader's voice rang out across the battlefield as she issued her final orders. For our world, for our future, for every soul that has ever lived and died for Earth, we will fight until the last breath. And with those words, the humans charged forward with a ferocity that was unmatched. The aliens, now realizing the futility of their efforts, began to retreat, but it was too late. The humans had already won. The tide had shifted. Aliens could no longer hold their ground. They had underestimated humanity's strength from the very beginning. And now it was clear they would not leave Earth with victory in hand. The final moments of the battle saw the last of the alien forces retreating into the sky, with the human forces in pursuit. The ambassador looked on as the humans began to regroup, their leaders standing proudly at the front. They had won. They had beaten the odds and shown the universe that no matter what came their way, they would never give up. They would never submit. They would fight until the end for their freedom and their future. The ambassador knew that the war was over. The humans had won. They had proven that no force could take away their dignity, their freedom, their right to choose their own path. And as the alien ships disappeared into the stars, the humans stood. Victorious. Earth was theirs once again. The final lesson had been learned. The humans were not to be underestimated. They were a force to be reckoned with. And they would continue to fight for their place in the universe, no matter what came next. And as the dust settled and the humans looked toward the horizon, they knew that this was only the beginning. Their fight for survival was over, but their fight for the future of their world had just begun. They would rise, they would rebuild, and they would show the universe that humanity was a force that could never be stopped. The final battle had come to a close, but the echoes of the war still lingered in the air. Earth was no longer the same, but humanity had proven something far greater than their survival. They had proven their place in the universe. They had shown the galaxies that no force, no matter how advanced, could ever break the spirit of a people determined to fight for their freedom, their home, their future. The skies were no longer filled with the roar of alien ships, but with the quiet hum of humanity's own rebuilding efforts. The people of Earth had gathered together stronger than ever before. They had seen the worst, and they had risen above it. They had fought, not just for survival, but for a promise to each other that they would never again be subjugated. They would never again allow anyone to decide their future for them. As the human leader stood in the ruins of the battlefield, looking out over the horizon, she felt an overwhelming sense of pride. The war was over, but the work had only just begun. The people of Earth had tasted victory, and they would never forget the price they had paid to achieve it. They would remember the sacrifice, the strength, the courage they had shown, not only to survive, but to thrive. They had learned that the greatest power was not in weapons or technology, but in their unity, in their hearts. The ambassador's message still echoed in her mind, the one where he had told them to submit or be destroyed, and yet here they stood victorious. The aliens had underestimated them. They had thought the humans were weak. They had thought that fear would break them, but instead it was the fear of losing their world, their way of life, that had fueled them to stand up and fight. The ambassador had offered them a choice, but humanity had never needed a choice. They had needed the will to fight, and they had found it within themselves. Together, they had proven that no matter what the universe threw their way, no matter the challenges, they would always rise. They would never kneel. They would never surrender to anyone. And now as the sun began to set on a peaceful earth, the human leader looked to the stars. She knew that their victory had not been just a victory for Earth, but for all worlds and all beings who had ever been oppressed, who had ever been forced to submit, who had ever been told that they were not worthy of freedom. Their victory was a message to the universe that no one should ever underestimate the power of the human spirit. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and no matter what came next, they would always fight for their place in the stars, for their place in the universe, for the right to determine their own fate with every breath they took, with every step they made. They would carry that victory forward and ensure that no one would ever threaten their world again. Earth was free, and the universe would never forget the lesson humanity had taught them. And as the final whispers of the battle faded into the quiet night, the human leader spoke softly to those around her. We have won, but the real journey begins now. The end.